And now,
it's 10 a.m.
Let's just get down to it.
And it's time for your sports fix.
Strap yourselves in, folks.
From two guys who have covered the teams you're passionate about for years.
We are professionals.
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone. Ben Anderson, David James filling in for Jake Scott, at least for the first 25 minutes here.
How are you?
I'm good, DJ. How are you?
Good.
Yeah.
Can't complain.
Why would you? I've never heard you. Well, I've heard you complain.
You've heard me complain.
But you're generally...
Well, there is a certain amount as you get older, you realize, do I want to spend the time complaining? It's not going to change anything. It doesn't make me feel better. Why am I doing this?
I wouldn't say you have a sunny disposition, but I would say you look on the bright side.
After I complain.
Sure.
Eventually.
Yeah. But you're of the age.
Yeah.
So, anyways, big show today coming up at 11 o'clock. We'll talk to Shahan Jayaraj, who's going to join us talking about the House Settlement, which is a huge deal and is probably going to change college sports.
I don't know. Aren't they still going to have a ton of NIL money? When they have this whole clearinghouse that's supposed to approve NIL deals, to me, that just screams, no. They're just... Isn't it just going to be all the NIL on top of this $20 million?
All right. Well, I want to talk basketball, but let's talk this for a minute because I do think this is interesting. Because my thought here initially was, well, if you have $20 million to spend and you get to choose how to spend it, and most universities are saying it's going to be 90% men's basketball, men's football. Well, I should switch that around. Men's football and then men's basketball. Won't some schools just say, hey, we want to have an identity and we're okay if our identity is women's basketball? And we're going to put an unequal share of our money there?
No.
You don't think there are going to be teams that just say, hey, we're going to invest in this because we
I love that theory, but I just ran through powers. South Carolina, no, they got to compete in SEC football.
You're right.
Baylor, no, they're absolutely going to compete. It's Texas. You got to be good in football.
Notre Dame,
no, you got to be good in football.
Sure.
So I came to UConn.
Right.
But they're trying to get football up, and because of conference realignment, they have to. And they have more reason to ignore football and promote women's basketball than any other school I can think of immediately, and they won't do it.
Tennessee's
and they
shouldn't. Not going to do it. So that's my thought. What if other schools do it? What if some of these other schools
somebody
say,
isn't good.
We have no you could give us $20 million, which is what you're going to have the ability to spend, to compete. Yeah. And if they say it doesn't matter, we're not going to be able to compete in football or men's basketball.
That would be interesting if somebody said we're going to be good at women's basketball and baseball.
Olympic sports or non-revenue sports.
But those are higher profile, quote-unquote, Olympic sports.
They are. Or softball. Look at what softball's doing right now.
Volleyball. Yeah. As luck would have it, I have a niece who's a graduate assistant volleyball coach. And we just had a family graduation thing, and she was there. And one of my kids, who's a sports fan, turned to her and said, what's NIL like in volleyball? Oh, top players make $1 million. What? Hey, hold it down, man. We're eating. There's people eating at the next table.
Right.
It's lunch. Dial it back.
Yeah, Logan Tom would have gotten $1 million.
Logan Tom should have gotten the big payday.
Yeah.
Went to Stanford, though, so that's pretty cool.
She passed on $1 million Nike deal to go to Stanford.
Stanford and the...
Yeah, then she would get both.
Well, I just can't believe they're going to cut back on the NIL, so I don't know there's going to be that big a change. I don't know how they're going to tell somebody you're not worth that and not face a lawsuit and lose.
Explain.
The clearinghouse is supposed to approve all these deals so they're not pay for play.
Right.
So, hey, I'm going to give someone $1 million to shoot this local commercial for whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
A local car dealer.
Yeah.
It's not worth $1 million. You can't pay him that. I'm suing you. You can't limit me to X, whatever they limit him to.
I understand what you're saying. Yes,
and then it gets
to prove
struck
it's
down
not pay for play.
Because it's capitalism.
And
it's the law of the land. Well, the NCAA used to. And how did that end? With a lawsuit. That's why we have the House Settlement.
Yeah.
And back pay.
I'm with you.
But not back pay for Hans Olsen. And Hans is upset about that.
He missed
by his Twitter
Did he ever get the video game money? Because that was probably before Christian's time. Because you remember initially there was a lawsuit against EA Sports to get a back pay for some of these players because I was working with Kyle Gunther at the time. And I promise you, we talked about it at every commercial break. How much money he would calculate for being in, NCAA 2006, NCAA 2007.
Yeah, I don't know that it's going to change that much. It'll probably change something, the law of unintended consequences, but right now I'm having a hard time seeing what it's going to change.
I'm worried it will change certain things for the worse.
Well, will sports get dropped?
Yes, probably. Right, because we're going to maximize even more.
The schools that don't have the money and are trying to play big-time football are thinking, if I drop these two sports, I can roll this money over into this sport.
Here's what gets interesting.
I mean, Mark Harlan hasn't been on the show, and we can ask him, and I don't know how much you want to get into it because it's probably in his favorite topic. If I were him, it wouldn't be my favorite topic, but they dropped beach volleyball. I assume that there's a few $100,000 in there with travel and salaries, right? And that's going to get rolled elsewhere in the department. That's not a sport that had been prioritized by the Big 12. It was prioritized by the Pac-12.
Because some of these schools are state-run schools, though, institutions, I am curious if there will be states, if not all across the country, but specific states that jump in and say, we are going to challenge the disbursement of this money if it's not dispersed more equally among the sports that are available at your school.
That lawsuit seems inevitable, given all the people who would have the ability to fire a lawsuit.
Yes.
There's some,
in the name of Title IX, which I think is totally fine.
Well, that's a whole different topic. How? And people are like, Title IX. I mean, isn't Title IX just being blown off and disregarded?
Yes, it is.
I mean, with all the money that's gone into football coaching salaries, let's not even get into the buildings because I know they can finagle that. Well, we build a cafeteria and all the athletes can use it, so that counts as funding for women's sports.
Right.
But just looking at the funding for football coaches, let's just leave basketball coaches and in some cases even baseball coaches alone and just go football. And look how the football staffs have gotten so much bigger.
Right.
Come on. And I've asked that of somebody, and they said, somebody locally, and they said, it's funny you mentioned that because I wondered the same thing, and I was on an NCAA committee, and I got to know somebody from another power conference. Okay, there's two lucrative ones.
Yeah, right.
It was one of those two, right?
Yeah.
And they said, oh, it's easy. You ought to see the softball stadium we built. And the coaches, what they get paid, and what the assistant coaches get paid, and they recruit on private jets and recruit in another state and are back home for dinner and to read a good night story to their kid. There's so much money, nobody will sue and rock the boat because they've got the best gravy train they could have ever imagined.
Sure.
It's not by the letter of the law equal, but nonetheless, somebody's making $250,000 and flying on private jets and playing inside essentially a minor league stadium. Yeah, they're not saying anything. Which makes sense to me because I didn't know how it wasn't happening.
And we'll see. Some of this we just got to get a year or two down the road.
Right.
You know, and figure out what the fallout's
going to be. And let the law
be.
and intended consequences happen.
I also worry just about one of my favorite things that I learned really quickly, one of the first major events I ever covered was the NCAA tournament. I think the first interview I ever had randomly.
So awesome.
I
love it.
I literally was down in the tunnel at the NCAA tournament, and I walked up to Kelly Olynyk, and I just put a phone in his hand, and I said, here's Kevin Graham. Talk to Kevin Graham on the radio. And
the clinic did?
He's great. But this is when all these kids didn't have any money. And, maybe Kelly had gotten a little money. I don't know. But nobody had money.
Where did he go to school?
Gonzaga.
I'm not going to tell you any stories I've heard.
Okay. But
suddenly they were really good.
Really out kicking their coverage for a while.
And by a while, I mean 25 years.
So I've loved getting to know amateur athletes and the unspoiled nature they have before they get paid. Because you change when you become a professional athlete. And when you have millions of dollars, it just changes the dynamic between the relationships of reporters, media, and athletes. And it doesn't mean the pros are bad guys by any means. There's a lot of really great guys. And even some of the wealthiest players I've ever covered, Joe Johnson, et cetera, have been some of my favorite, Richard Jefferson, that I've ever talked to and remain very human.
Those two, yeah.
Remain very human and probably made...
I have Joe Johnson and Richard Jefferson stories. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Joe Johnson was worth $250 million by the time he was in Utah, and Richard Jefferson made well over 150.
I asked him a question once, and he side-eyed me like, if I give you a real answer, are you going to make fun of me? And I tried to put on the most earnest Boy Scout face I had available because I really want to know the answer, and I wasn't there to make fun of him. And then when there was a follow-up question and another one, he got into the discussion, and it ended up being a news director who hated me and hated sports actually texted me, that was awesome. Yeah. Well, yeah, it was awesome because Joe Johnson decided to tell me the truth. That's what the whole awesomeness was. If Joe had decided to hit me with cliches, it either would have been terrible or I would have skipped it and done something else.
But it's not lost on me.
It was about why he did yoga.
that we were talking to those guys, and yoga fits right into it. We were talking to those guys when they were 35 years old, right? Joe had come back around. Joe was no longer the young, cool guy. He had come back around. He's still one of the coolest people I've ever seen in my life.
But he was the wise veteran, and he was, for the younger guys, I think he was everybody's favorite uncle.
And Richard Jefferson knew he was in just a weird situation with the Jazz and had gotten traded here from Golden State.
I got a call. And this is in the era when they've stopped doing all the Sunday night interviews that you grew up with, right? It was just done. Hey, Richard Jefferson wants to do TV when he's done playing, and he'd like to get some reps now. Would you be willing to have him on your Sunday night show? You know, not to interview him, but to some kind of analyst role. And it was like, and I get this call in like January or February. I'm like, yeah, he went to the University of Arizona. If he wants to come on and the night of the NCAA tournament, because I checked the schedule, if he wants to pick games and tell me who's going to the Final Four and why and who's not and why, I'd love that. Oh, well, I think that'd be right up his alley, and he'd have a little bit of time to prepare. I'm like, okay, and he did it, and he was really good. Yeah. And when I see him on the NBA Finals now, I think, I wonder if I walked up to him if he'd remember me.
No, he might. No,
he might, because it'd be one of the first times he was on TV. Yeah. He wouldn't remember me from doing some post-game interview.
He's pretty wise. He's a very wise person. I think
he's very social
people.
Also.
Yeah.
I think he's very social. So
he might.
Anyway.
But along those lines, I hope we don't lose some of the enjoyability of the young 18, 19, and 20-year-olds that we get at BYU Media Day, that we get at Big 12 Media Day, now that they're cashing in. And I hope we don't get a little bit of the Shedeur Sanders treatment, which we all got last year. At least I did. Maybe 2 years ago I wasn't at Big 12 Media Day. Last year,
I was going to say it's probably just going to be case by case.
Yeah. And I hope it's still as common
that
we get
degree, it was always case by case.
It was, but I still hope we get to enjoy the young players. And that's just a selfish aspect of this for me.
Yeah.
I don't have any problem with them making money. They're generating money. They can get some of the money.
Yeah, I'm fine with that too. And PK was talking earlier. Well, your thing is you enjoyed getting the players' stories, and you know fans who enjoyed the stories, and now you and the fans don't get that, so you don't like it. But that's just old school. It's not how it is anymore. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
that's pretty much what it is.
It is.
I did enjoy those stories. There's an era of those Utah basketball players. I mean, Andre Miller and Keith Van Horn and Mike Doliak playing 4 years. Yeah, you got to know their story, and the fans did, and they enjoyed it. And now it's just different.
So I hope that doesn't go away totally, and we'll see.
It's kind of going away.
And
with the transfer,
and the more money they have, the more they're going to be pampered.
The guys who transfer in for their last year, I mean, they'll talk to you, but it's definitely a different vibe than. Somebody who's been here 3 years.
But what's funny about that is the quality of players not changing.
No.
Because the money is
the same players, and they're all moving around, and they're getting paid.
Yeah, finally. Right. They're just getting paid.
Yeah, but
it's not like the talent pool is better just because the money's involved. It's the same talent pool.
No, it was only a little better briefly because they gave everybody a bonus year, and you got older guys, and I think you really saw that. And we're getting past the COVID year now, so.
Yeah, that bottleneck is cleared. So we're not at that point where there's that kind of overflowing, extra body around, extra year. You're right. So. We'll see. I'm curious about that aspect of it, and I hope it remains. I hope the fact that they're just still in college, and my fear actually isn't that the kids are going to change. It's how the handlers of the kids change, because now they say, well, this kid has $1 million or $2 million. We know what we're paying him, so we're going to protect him in a different way.
But the school's handlers are already doing that.
They are.
I mean, they're screaming last question at you after 2.5 minutes.
Right.
Never mind. I'm not driving up here for this.
So I wonder if that gets worse, and I hope it doesn't. And
I don't know. I mean, if they want to cut 2.5 minutes down to 1.5 minutes, I guess it would be worse. But so many people are already out. Forget it.
And then we'll see the different cars driving
I've seen people.
Practice.
I saw Cam Rising giving an interview, fully engaged, and someone who wasn't paying attention was paid to scream "Last question." Last question. Cam turned and looked at him like, "I'm talking. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Did you just check out?"
Right.
Because that'd be the best possible explanation of what just happened.
Yeah. So
whatever.
Anyways, it's
now we're gonna talk hoops.
Sure. Do you want to?
Yeah, we got like 3 minutes and go.
I mean, the Pacers are in a good spot.
They are.
They're 1-1. They're still fine.
Okay. They're also not the better team.
They're not the better team,
and that's a bad spot. But they found a way to win one. And when you're not the better team, the longer you make the series go, the better, because the thing that can work for you is pressure on the other team. Will it crack them? Sometimes it seems like it does, and sometimes it doesn't. And having once watched back in the day a Magic Johnson Laker team that I thought was better than the Celtics crack, they gave away 2 games. They should have won 5 out of 7. Mm-hmm. The Celtics, I think they're better, but they won the series even though they weren't the better team. And there's a million other examples. You can go back a year, you can go back 5. I mean, the Cavs and when they took down the Warriors.
Mm-hmm. Warriors are a better team. Yeah,
the Warriors are a better team. Get one more. Now, that was weird because the Cavs were down 3-1.
Right.
I think it's usually better to get up 1-0, 2-1, and then see if the pressure goes to work on them.
And that's where the advantage now does still lie a little bit with the Pacers, is that ideally you win the next two at home and you're up 3-1, and then all the pressure's on, and almost always teams win.
If you told me one
3-1.
team was going to win the next two games,
I would pick the Thunder.
I would pick the Thunder,
Of course, I would
too.
absolutely pick the Thunder.
I'd pick the Thunder.
But the pressure's off now that you have to win both home games. Because if you were down 2-0 and you were the Pacers and you
You'd
lose
have
a
to win
single,
two.
it's over. The series is over. You're going back to OKC.
You don't want any part of 3-1 going back to OKC for Game 5.
It's over.
They're
you
the better
win
team.
one now, you're guaranteed to come back to Indiana in a Game 6. And Game 6 is really hard to win on the road. It's essentially a Game 7 because it's always a closeout. And now you're playing it at home.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about, Game 7 with
but
Chet
the Thunder
Holmgren and
have
Jalen Williams.
so much. Holmgren, I mean, why was Holmgren 2 for 9 and finger-rolling layups that he should have dunked in Game 1? And I think they clearly talked to him between Game 1 and 2. And by they, I mean his coach, his assistant coach, his agent, his parents, his siblings, his college roommate, his college coach. I mean, everybody like, Chet, what are you doing?
Did you see his dad when he was here for Summer League?
I did.
Have you seen Chet's dad?
No.
Imagine Chet with a really long ponytail. That's his dad.
That's his dad,
That's
huh?
his dad, yeah. Big hippie with a really long ponytail.
Well, I thought he was way more aggressive. End of the first quarter, he could have taken a 3, but he decided to take the guy off the dribble, and he dropped in a nice lay-in. And later on, he was getting dunks. And, yeah, if he's 15-6 guy, they're in a much better spot.
Which is nice that he doesn't have to be 20 and 10.
Jalen Williams did not shoot the ball well in the first two games. I thought he did a good job of getting to the free throw line in Game 2. 8 of 9, gets his 19 points. At some point, I think he's too good to keep shooting like this. So if I'm the Pace Mann used to say this all the time. He'd see stats, first quarter, halftime, third quarter, whatever. We'd be looking at halftime stats, and he's like, man, they're shooting 68%, and they got a 4-point lead. They are going to lose this game. And it didn't matter who they was.
Yeah.
It didn't matter if it was the Jazz. It didn't matter which opponent was coming in. Worst team in the league, best team in the league. When you have those things, those outliers, you need to take advantage of them.
Where I would be curious and maybe somewhat favorable for the Pacers is ideally your role players play better. Now, Obi Toppin was great in Game 1, hit 6 of 9 threes. He was not good last night, just 1 of 8 from the floor overall. And then you hope that Aaron Wiggins and Caruso are not as comfortable playing in Indiana. Caruso's probably doesn't matter that much.
Wiggins might be.
Might be what? Susceptible? Or might just be good
Might
regardless?
just be good enough to...
And they are good.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a good team.
Wiggins is a pretty good player to be coming off the bench.
And to be drafted in the 50s. Yeah, that was a nice pick. They've done a good job with some of those. So, and then, but I do think it is curious about both Chet and Jalen, still young players on the road in a tough environment. How do they show up? Because they haven't shown up consistently throughout the playoffs. Shea has. Shea puts up 30 every night. That's what he does.
Shea is the best player on the court.
Yeah.
And it's really good to be the team with the best player on the court every night.
And Tyrese Halliburton, I know his
happened?
stat line looked fine, 17, 6, and 3.
No. 5 in the first 3 quarters, 12 in the fourth, and the 12 in the fourth came when the game was over.
He doesn't need to try and be Shea. He doesn't need to try and take over the game, but he can't wait until the fourth quarter to show up.
Agreed.
He doesn't need to be a 30-point game. Now, if you get one from him, you probably win that game.
You're going to need to get one from him at some point.
At some point, but he doesn't need to try and do it.
He's not going to have 7
of
of those. Shea might have 6 or 7 of those if the series goes that long.
But if Tyrese can do it once in Indiana, I think they're going to have a chance to win.
I think the problem for the Pacers, they are going to go home, and you're right, maybe the role players would be better, and certainly the energy of a crowd. Jeff Hornacek said once that where home court matters, he says it doesn't hurt the road team. Like veterans, everyone's booing you. It doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter. We have all had so many things shouted at us. It doesn't matter anymore. But at home, when you're a little fatigued and you got to come up with one energy, you got to get a rebound, you got to get a stop, and the crowd goes nuts. Sometimes it feels like you levitate. It's just kind of like, it's just like, he says it's a real thing. So maybe the Pacers get some of that, and that helps. But I think the Thunder going to be focused like a laser. They've already been behind in this series once. They're not planning on being behind again. They are planning on winning Game 3.
And this Pacers team is unkillable. They've been in this situation a couple of times. Not this situation. They've been up 2-0 in all their playoff series.
I love a good stat. And the Thunder are now 30-2. 30 wins, 2 losses against Eastern Conference teams this year.
Yeah.
And didn't you think the West was way better than the East?
Yeah.
Didn't everybody think the West was way better than the East?
Well, and
haven't we been saying that for like 20 years to the point we barely say it anymore?
Their margin for wins at home has to be. I mean, in the playoffs alone, they've probably got to be plus 70.
Why is the middle of the East so bad now? And in a 15-team conference, the middle of the East, we're talking about 7, 8, 9.
Some of the teams got old. Milwaukee specifically got old and injured. That was one of their major issues. Miami got old. That's just kind of the problem. Some teams just got old, I mean,
Milwaukee was the 5 seed. You're not down to 7, 8, 9. Okay, Miami got old and traded Butler. I'll give you that one. I just think for whatever reason, there's more poorly run organizations in the Eastern Conference. And there have been for a long time, and maybe it goes to ownership.
Old Mage just has to be iron sharpening iron. You just don't have to be that good in the East to compete. You
Possibly.
have to be really good in the West.
I would just think that stuff's cyclical. I think in the AFC and FC, it's been cyclical. The AFC is really good right now. Yeah, well, they got a bunch of the best quarterbacks. I mean,
Orlando was hurt this year. They shouldn't be there. Detroit's getting better. They're climbing out of it. So
Detroit is on the climb.
I might push back a little bit against the theory.
All right.
I'd listen to it.
Then why are the Thunder 30-2?
They drafted well. They got Aaron Wiggins in the 50s. That's why. All right, DJ, thank you for hanging out.
Anytime.
Top 3 stories coming up next. Stick around. Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Accessing.
This is Hans Olsen and Scotty G.
Eric Weddle, kind enough to join us. You find out you're up for the College Football Hall of Fame. What's your first thought when you get that phone call?
Just humbled by it all, quite honestly. I think I have a real shot at the College Football Hall of Fame. I don't think I have any shot at the NFL Hall of Fame. So when I look at the College Football Hall of Fame, I think, I belong there at some point, whether it's now or 10 years from now. I think I belong as one of the best college football players to have played the game. So whenever it happens, or if it happens, you guys know me, I live life to the fullest. It's not going to change whether I fall asleep at 10 o'clock or midnight. I got many other things that are on my mind. But it's really humbling and truly honored, obviously, and know that it took coaches, players, faculty, family, wife, kids. It doesn't happen alone.
Catch Hans and Scotty weekdays from noon to 3 on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. It's time to break down the biggest stories of the day. This is the top 3 stories of the day on KSLSports.com. On 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. No Jake Scott today. He'll be back with us a week from Wednesday. Short prison sentence for Jake, or vacation. I can't remember what he said he was doing. But top 3 stories brought to you by our friends at J. Brooks Jewelers. J. Brooks, cherish your loved ones with J. Brooks Jewelers. Explore our expertly crafted engagement rings made from the finest materials. J. Brooks Jewelers, 2 locations up and down the Wasatch Front. Christian, what is number 1?
Number 1, we know last week the Utah Jazz made a big move hiring Austin Ainge, but they're not done making moves in the front office.
Yeah, they aren't bringing in new faces, but they are making some changes, according to Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype. He reported that Marquise Newman has been promoted to the director of pro scouting, backfilling a spot that, as Zach Lowe reported late last week, if you missed his podcast, the Jazz have made some changes in their front office before Austin Ainge got here. Jazz are backfilling those a little bit. Marquise Newman stepping up as the director of pro scouting, and Katie Benson, who is now going to be the general manager for the Salt Lake City Stars. So Marquise Newman was the GM for the Stars. But like anyone who works for the Stars, you really have 2 jobs. You definitely have to do your work with the G League team, but you are supporting, helping, stepping up, filling in with the Jazz as well. So Marquise Newman's been doing a lot of pro scouting stuff for the Jazz, which means you're watching the rest of the NBA, trying to figure out what other players do well, and then figuring out, how do you get them to the Jazz, or what value would they have? And, you've got all 400, 500 players in the NBA ranked. You kind of look at how they, what their value is and where they could come in and maybe help you if they became available. He's been doing that with the Stars as well. And if you look at his tenure with the Stars, they've actually had probably their best 2 years with him overseeing the team. And then Katie Benson, who I've spoken with a couple of times, is pretty interesting. She played in the WNBA, played at Maryland. I think she played at Harvard before that. I have to look at where she's an Ivy Leaguer, and then had a cup of coffee in the WNBA. But now she's going to be the GM for the Salt Lake City Stars. I think one of 2 women who've become a general manager for a G League team. But both extremely sharp people, and I think the Jazz getting a little bit younger and maybe falling in line a little bit more. And I wonder if, maybe not Austin Ainge asked them to make these moves, but if the Jazz recognized if they were going to promote somebody or bring somebody in, I should say, as the as the president of basketball operations if they'd want to maybe have some different voices there coming in to work with Austin Ainge, and if that was going to be if they wanted to make a change, if this was the time to do it.
Better make the changes all at once.
Yeah,
I think.
I agree. You don't want to be clearing house a year from now. And maybe Austin will still come in and make a couple of different decisions. I've spoken with people at the Jazz, and they said they weren't planning on making a lot of different moves or bringing in new faces. I don't think there's a lot more changes coming. But some reorganizing for the Utah Jazz regardless. And, when somebody moves out, you've got to have somebody else move in. So we will see where this goes from here. Certainly interesting timing 2 weeks before the draft. But again, if you're the director of pro scouting for the Jazz, you're not necessarily, this isn't Sean James who runs college scouting or their international scouts who are looking at the draft so much. And Austin Ainge is kind of his specialty as well. So some changes for the Jazz, interesting to keep an eye on. Number 2.
Number 2, you and DJ hit on it a little bit already, but the Thunder tied it up last night.
Retreats and dumps it inside to Holmgren. Right wing dub, cross court left to Wiggins. Sets himself for another angle left three-pointer. Gets that! Thunder offense getting wiggy with it, baby, in game 2. He has 17 points, including 5 three-pointers. Thunder 107, the Pacers 85.
When your role players, your 5th and 6th best players on the team or further down, step up and go crazy from 3 like Wiggins did, you're going to have a great chance to win these games. And that was the opportunity last night that you saw from the Thunder. Some interesting adjustments. They still stayed small with Case Wallace in the starting lineup. They did not go back to Isaiah Hartenstein with the 2 big lineup, and they still won the rebounding battle, which was a positive for the Thunder that they really lacked in Game 1 where they really got hurt.
Pascal Siakam was not good.
No, this is one of the flaws with the Pacers teams. And, it's funny to look at a team that has all these comebacks. The problem with comebacks is you have to make a comeback.
You're losing.
Yeah, that's kind of what you miss in the idea of, you're erasing 20-point leads or no lead is safe. It's like, yeah, but that means the other team's down. And if you're the Pacers, it's nice to have that in your toolbox. It's nice to be comfortable being behind and not thinking the game's over and feeling like, hey, we believe in ourselves as a team of destiny. We can come back and do it. It's way better to just be up by 10 points. And that's not an operation or a situation where the Pacers have been operating from very often in these playoffs. And look, when they're up big, they're holding on to wins and they're just winning games easily. When they're having to battle back over and over and over, that gets difficult. And I don't think they went in with the plan last night of, let's just fall behind by 20 points and come back. But I do think they've gotten a little lackadaisical in some games. And Jake and I talked a lot about Game 5 at Madison Square Garden in the conference finals in the East, how much they just didn't show up against the Knicks and said, we'll take this back to Indiana and be fine. I felt like we saw a little bit of that last night. And that's maybe the lack of, I don't want to say, killer's mentality that they could have to win these games more easily. But I do wonder if they're just not quite willing to show up every night. And I think you can't be giving away games at this point.
Well, yeah, you shock the world. You win Game 1 on a last-second shot. I mean, it's pretty easy to show up for Game 2 and just kind of coast. And then you get kind of reality checked, and it's like, oh, yeah, this team is really, really good. You gotta take it serious.
And look, one of the reasons, and you don't want to win games because of injuries. That's not how you want to advance in the playoffs. But, when you're down 20, the other team doesn't have to play that hard. And they don't have to play their guys the whole game. And you look at the number of players who actually played last night for the Thunder. I mean, and then they regularly play 10. They're pretty interesting in how deep their rotation is. But some of the names that are playing, and even if it's only a couple of minutes, remind me when Jason Tatum tore his Achilles. The last minute of the game of Game 5 in a close game that the Knicks were just continuing to put the pressure on the Celtics to feel like they have to win. And again, you're not playing so Chet hurts himself. But you want to make them feel like they have to be engaged and play every game. And now you see Tyrese Halliburton limping off the floor and limping in his post-game press conference. It's like, I just don't want those guys to have an easy time any minute of the finals. I don't want them to have an easy quarter. And I think the Pacers have let them have an easy quarter now and an easy game. And you get 3 days off to rest and relax before you go back to Indiana. I just want to keep the pressure on. And that's something I wish the Pacers did a little bit better that they don't quite do yet.
No, I don't know. It's just getting back to, I like DJ's argument about the Thunder having 2 losses against the East all season long. And it's like, these guys are just juggernauts.
They are. They have a chance. And I saw a tweet last night, and just steal it, I don't remember who said it, but this could very much be the Allen Iverson 48-point first game where he steps over Ty Lue in L.A. and had snapped their previous 12-game winning streak in the playoffs. They ended up finishing that playoff run, I think, 16-1. It's one of the best playoff performances. I think it's tied for the best playoff performance all time. They only lost 1 game. there's a chance that this only goes 5. I don't want to throw dirt yet on the Indiana Pacers because they have shown continuously that they are very hard to kill and they are hard to beat. No one's been able to do it in a 7-game series so far. So I'm not thinking that they're going to lose 3 straight now to Oklahoma City. But you're right. This is a juggernaut of a team. They have decimated the Eastern Conference all year long. Their only other loss was to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and I think they were up 20 in that game and kind of gave it away in a weird way. So they are figuring it out. I still don't think the Thunder played a necessarily great game last night. They shot pretty well, 48% from the floor, 38% from 3, but Jalen Williams has not been great. Lou Dort was pretty unimpactful on the defensive side of the ball, and he still had 5 fouls in 26 minutes. Chet Holmgren had a really good first quarter. It was pretty loud, but I didn't think he was necessarily dominant. He only finished with 15 points as well, and they got a couple of nice performances off the bench. So we haven't seen the Thunder at their best yet either. But yeah, Pascal's going to have to play a lot better, to your point about the Pacers. You need earlier production from Tyrese Halliburton, and then we need to see guys like Aaron Nesmith continue to step up at a high level and have some big three-point shooting games. Benedict Mathurin was okay last night, but has to even take it to the next level. Obi Toppin has to be better off the bench. And if they can do that, they can compete. But if not, yeah, they could find themselves down 3-1 going back to Oklahoma City, where the Thunder could close this out and win in 5. All right, number 3.
Number 3, over to the NHL. Game 3 of the Stanley Cup playoffs tonight after a thrilling Game 1 and 2.
To the near point, out one, the zone is Marchand. A pass ahead, well, now Marchand, a breakaway, hits in Marchand. Can he tie the series? And he scores! Brad Marchand in overtime, and the Panthers win Game 2, 5-4. The series is tied at a game apiece.
It's easy to look back at champions throughout history and see the really monumental or consequential trade that they made at the deadline to bring in a player who ends up turning up huge. You know, Jazz fans obviously will always remember Jeff Hornacek and how quickly he made an impact for the Jazz and changed the Jazz. And within a couple of years, they were going to the finals, and he was hitting huge shots and winning playoff series. Marchand doing the same thing now after the midseason trade to Florida, even though they won the title last year, coming in and scoring in double overtime. Was it double overtime again?
Single overtime, Game 1, double overtime, Game 2.
And shorthanded, right? Am I right on that? Anyways, really impressive series just from both of these teams. The Oilers have had to come back and compete to tie these games up late in both games and found a way to do it, but then to lose a marathon game. We'll see how Game 3 pays off and pans out. They go back down to Florida now, so we'll see how Edmonton can play because they were playing at home and had a little bit of an edge there. We'll see if they're able to keep this up when they go on the road to Florida.
I just really like the idea, like you said, the defending champion going and making a big acquisition at the trade deadline, just not being satisfied knowing that, you know, this is their title window and right now is the time to go all in and get a legend like Marchand.
It's where, you know, we've talked about it in the NBA a little bit. Regardless, I think, of what happens with the Thunder, like if you think you could trade for Giannis, I would still do it. Now, you're not trading Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for it, but like he's probably better than Shai. I still think he's probably a better player than Shai. He's definitely a better two-way player. So if you could, you know, get him for some of your other players, your role players, and all this draft capital, like at some point that draft capital only has so much value, and your hope would be to get a player of the caliber of a Giannis. So yeah, go out and get better. Don't ever stop getting better. Don't just rest on your laurels of saying, hey, well, we're good. We won the title last year. That's good enough. Yeah, Florida now has a chance to really put a dynasty together, and they've done it by going out and adding more talent midseason. And it's helped them now win this first or the second game and split the series 1-1 as they go back home. So fun game tonight. Excited to watch that as well. All right, when we come back, we will continue to break down the NBA Finals. We'll talk more about the House Settlement and what it means for college sports, including what the University of Utah had to say about it earlier today already. Stick around. More Jake and Ben coming up next. 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I present...
This is JJ and Alex.
Austin Ainge announced as the president of basketball operations for the Utah Jazz. They've got a lot of work, obviously. There's not just a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of years to have to figure some things out. This is not a business-like position. This is a personnel position within the organization, and that is to say, hey, look, we have got to get the right personnel in the building. We've got to figure this thing out. We've got to find exactly where it is that we want to put ourselves.
This is a big loss for the Celtics. He played a big role in helping assemble the roster that they currently have. Brad Stevens runs the day-to-day operations of the Boston Celtics, and it says a lot that Brad could have sent Danny's son packing a long time ago if he didn't have value. Instead, he made him the assistant general manager. He helped build that roster that won an NBA championship last year. He has earned the place where he's at in the NBA today.
Catch JJ and Alex afternoons from 3 to 6. Presented by G2G Bars on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Whether it's the Jazz, Utes, Cougars, or Aggies, these guys have got you covered.
Time to eat, fellas.
You're locked on to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson.
1, 2, 3, move it.
On 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Coming up in about 15 minutes here, we're going to talk to Shahan Jayaraja, who's going to join us, National College Football writer for CBS Sports, breaking down the latest with this House Settlement, what it means, maybe some of the unforeseen things that we think where it could have an impact in college athletics, including locally. And I'll let you read, or I'll let you hear a little bit from what the statement was at the University of Utah. Now it's coming up here in just a moment. But it is Minky Monday. We got Father's Day coming up right around the corner. Caller number 12, 801-575-ZONE, 801-575-ZONE. Going to win a Minky blanket for your dad or for yourself this Father's Day. KSL Sports listeners get 50% off with code ZONE50. For details and additional chance to win, visit KSLSports.com. Be the 12th caller right now, 801-575-ZONE, 801-575-ZONE. Quickly during the break, before we get to the statement from the University of Utah, interesting NBA news. Darius Garland, the all-star point guard who plays alongside Donovan Mitchell in Cleveland, is undergoing toe surgery. He's expected to miss the next 4 to 5 months, which you can do the math there. They're saying he's going to resume basketball activities by the start of training camp. It's the same thing that Taylor Hendricks said. He was resuming basketball activities, and everyone wondered, is he going to be available for Summer League? And the Jazz quickly put a lid on that and said, absolutely not. But maybe by the beginning of training camp for the Jazz that they were expected Taylor Hendricks to be back. Darius Garland, if you're talking 5 months before he's back on the court or back to full strength, I mean, you're talking about November already, which, maybe he only misses a couple of weeks of the season, and maybe that's why they had this timing for him. But that trickles into December. They fall behind it all. Clearly, they're not the class of the Eastern Conference. They're going to have a leg up on Boston next year without Jason Tatum. But we'll see what other moves get made around the league. It just could come to an end quickly in Cleveland. And despite the fact that they had the best regular season record this year, it's not what they're going to be judged on anymore going forward. They've got to have postseason success. Donovan Mitchell's still not gotten out of the second round. And if they lose again, there's going to be real conversations about how do they improve the team and where do they need to get better, because the bet they've been having is that Evan Mobley can become a better player than Donovan Mitchell. And if Evan Mobley becomes better than Donovan and Donovan's your number 2, you might have a chance to win a championship. If Evan doesn't get better, I don't think they think about moving Evan. I think they think about moving Donovan. And I wonder if they say, well, we need to get somebody who's better than Evan Mobley in a trade, and Donovan Mitchell gives us your best chance to do it. So we'll watch the Cleveland status. They're going to be an interesting team to talk about, and a lot of eyes are going to be on them in the NBA over the offseason to see if they can improve and what type of trades they might try and make to get better. I wouldn't be surprised if they kick the tires on Kevin Durant to see if there's value there that they could bring back without giving up a ton. Otherwise, if they try and run it back next season, they're already starting with one hand tied behind their back without Darius Garland. All right, I said I would let you hear from Mark Harlan, University of Utah, and what they had to say about the landmark House Settlement that will kick in on July 1st. And here's the changes that you're going to see from the University of Utah, according to Mark Harlan. We are all in on investing up to the maximum allowable in revenue share, which is approximately $20.5 million for the 2025-26 season. Though they are finalizing their plans on how the revenue will be shared, they're also going to add 23 new scholarships with a total of $1.15 million implemented into the NIL contracts between the institution and student athletes. That's one of the differences now with the House Settlement is these schools can now be involved in these conversations. They weren't supposed to before. They now can. They've been doing it anyways. Mark Harlan said they're also going to expand student-athlete endorsement opportunities with businesses and organizations. Through the existing Elevate U program, they've increased their investment with the addition of a brand strategy and governance team dedicated to providing Utah student-athletes comprehensive support as they build their brand. I think what you're going to see going forward is just, I guess, a tighter relationship between the university and the players. again, they've already been blurring these lines a lot and organizing who's getting paid and how they're getting paid, and that's how they're bringing in transfers. You're not going to have to hide it. You're not going to have to pretend that the university is not involved in a lot of these brand deals anymore, and that's how they're getting there. And I think you're going to actually see universities plant their flag and say, look at how much we paid players. And maybe you don't get the square number because you don't want to create infighting within the locker room, but I think you're going to get maybe a little clearer idea of how much some of these players are actually getting paid, where it still remains pretty murky, where, you talk about AJ DiBonsa, and some people are saying it was $7 million, and some people were saying it's $4 million, and some people at BYU were saying, well, we're not even paying him the most. I think you're going to have schools saying, yeah, we're willing to give you the biggest share of this disbursement that we're getting in our revenue sharing that we get. We're willing to pay, our top players X amount of dollars in hopes that actually helps their recruiting.
Come be the face of our program.
Yeah. And you're an $8 million man, or the first $10 million man in college sports, or $5 million woman. We already see it, the pitcher at Texas Tech on the softball team who gets the 7-figure deal. We hear about that because it's a big deal that a softball player is making that much money. You're going to see that throughout college sports. And I'll be curious how it changes the relationship. Again, the hard part is it's hard to criticize college players when they're playing for a scholarship and single them out individually and say, like, maybe it's a kid. He's got other things to worry about. He's going to class. He's got a real life. Professional athletes lose that anonymity. You don't get that protection. When you're making $4 million, $5 million, $8 million in the case of some of these players, they're going to face a higher level of criticism, even though they're still 18 years old. They're still 19 years old. And, I still think for the most part, not for the most part, but a lot of these kids are going to be the highest rated high school recruit that gets paid the most, based on potential, reputation, et cetera. You're going to have some big-time transfers that get paid, obviously, but you're still going to have a lot of young people getting more money than they've ever gotten before, than we've really ever seen in college athletics. And the pressure's going to ramp up, and how they're handled and how they're dealt with online is going to ramp up. It's going to get messy, and I'm excited to talk about this more.
One thing that I noticed, Ross Dillinger from Yahoo Sports has been hammering it a lot. He keeps tweeting out, like, this is opening the door to so many lawsuits. It is going to get so messy so fast. And, a term you guys like to use on the show, it's just the cat in the wall. And it's just going to open up all these other problems starting soon, I'm assuming.
And that's, I guess, my curious. The best managers in sports, the best coaches in sports, the best front offices in sports anticipate future problems or trends and address them before they become obvious to everybody else. It happens in the draft, it happens in trades, it happens in player development, it happens in team building, etc. So it's got to happen at the college level. What does this change? I don't know, because if I did, I would be an athletic director. But maybe our next guest coming up in the next segment, Shahan Jayaraj, is going to be able to help us with that. A college football writer from CBS Sports. How does this House settlement change college athletics going forward? We'll talk to Shahan coming up next. Stick around. More Jake and Ben coming up next. 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.